on this feast of Christ the King, the idea of a king can oftentimes throw us off because, of course, we live in a nation and a country that rebelled against the king. But still, we call Jesus Christ our King, and we learn two things because of that title. One, how small we are, and two, how great God is. Now, yesterday, 24 pilgrims and I just got back from Italy. And so, yes, you're going to hear about it, not to make you jealous because you weren't there with us, but because there is a point. Because at each church that we visited, I noticed how bigger and bigger each church got to be, especially when we got to Rome, where we visited the four major basilicas of St. John Lateran, St. Mary Major, St. Paul outside the walls, and then, of course, St. Peter's. You walk into St. Paul outside the walls, and you're struck with how big and humongous the church is. And then, of course, it gets bigger and bigger. You get to St. Mary Major, and the tabernacle alone, just the tabernacle, can fit in this whole center space, and almost as tall as those rafters. And so you can imagine how immense and massive that church is. And then you get to St. Peter's, and then you see that the statues literally are as tall as our ceiling. And you can imagine, wow, just how small you are. And literally, that is what you feel. Now, we can look back and we thank God, we thank the leaders of old of our church for creating such masterpieces, creating such wonderful things. And we can think that they did that all for the greater glory and honor of God. But let's face it, the popes of old were just very similar to the secular leaders and powers of that day. Meaning, they weren't really doing that for the greater glory and honor of God, but for the greater glory and honor of themselves. Because, let's face it, popes are like human beings, are human beings. And they oftentimes operated out of this egotistical and narcissistic attitude that they were going to build these grand churches, again, so not to bring attention to God, but bring attention to themselves. But this is the first thing that God teaches us as we call Jesus our King. Because even in those structures, where again, the statues are massive, and the dome itself of St. Peter's, from bottom level to the top, takes about 500 steps, 500 plus steps. Now, I'm not bragging, but I did them. I climbed from the very bottom to the very top. And so I got to the top, inside the dome, and you're looking down, and literally, the people are like ants. And even when you're standing on the floor and looking up, you feel small. And that's what God does. He makes us feel small because he wants us to remember that no human being, no matter how great he or she may be, no matter who that person might be, no one is more powerful and great than God. And for us to remember that, we have to feel small. We have to feel this small in front of the grandeur of God. That unless we realize that we literally are nothing compared to God, then we will make the same mistakes as leaders of old. We will make the same mistakes as any human leader of any nation might make when they think that they are more powerful than anything or anyone else. All power, all honor, all glory, all authority in heaven and on earth has to be given to God alone. And we can never realize the truth to that unless we realize how small we are compared to God's grandeur, compared to God's majesty, how small we really are, how insignificant we really are before God. Because again, God did not need to create us, but he created us nonetheless. And so as we imagine how big and massive those churches are, we again realize, we learn as we call Christ our King, that really us and every human being is truly small and insignificant compared to who God is. But then we learn the second thing, and we learn it from the gospel today. As we hear of Jesus dying on the cross, this great and immense and awesome God humbled himself and became small, just like us. He became small and became a creature like us. And even further, he decides to die on a cross, a humiliating and painful death. Why? Because he wants to restore a relationship. And so again, we see how great God is in doing this, in choosing to become one of us, in choosing to die on a cross. He restores the broken relationship. He restores the relationship that was broken because of Adam and Eve's sin, and he restores the relationship because of our own sinfulness as well. Every time we think we can do better than God, that's the relationship that Jesus has come to restore. And in this, Jesus shows us that our King is interested in one thing and one thing alone, and that is having a real and true relationship with each and every one of us. God did not need to save us. God did not need to create us. But again, he comes because he wants to restore that relationship. He wants to restore what was broken so that we would have an access to him and access to God and access to that relationship. God shows us in Jesus our King that this is his desire and will for us, and that he asks only one thing of us, and that is to focus on our relationship with him just as much as he focuses on his relationship with us. Realizing how awesome God is in not only creating everything, heaven, earth, things visible and invisible, that he is greater than all things, and yet he humbles himself to become one of us and restores that broken relationship. We again see just how small we are, but how great God is. And when we recognize that, then we truly will be able to understand why we call Jesus our King. Because again, God alone is greater than anything and everything in heaven and on earth. That God alone has authority, dominion, and power over every single life. But that in humbling himself, God shows his even greater greatness, if I can say it that way, in reminding us that he loves us so much that all he wants is to be in a real relationship with us and to truly call us his sons and daughters.